Hello everyone and welcome to Mayor Brown's Battery Storage webinar series. I'm Ben Thompson, my project finance partner based in Mayor Brown's Singapore office. And I'm delighted to be joined in this session by Subhash Narayanan, who's head of project finance at DBS Bank in Singapore. In this session, I'm going to be discussing with Subhash his views on the current state of play of battery storage in Asia, and in particular Southeast Asia, some of the opportunities and challenges, and what he thinks the market might look like going forward. So I hope you all enjoy it. Okay, hi Subhash. Thanks a lot for agreeing to participate today. Could I start, Subhash, by just asking you to introduce yourself and your bank and some of the work you do in the project finance space? Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me on this webinar. As Ben mentioned, I head the project finance business for DBS. DBS is an Asia-focused bank. We do financial advisory and arranging services for project finance transactions across the region. We have done both power, oil and gas, mining metals, transportation sectors. In terms of country coverage, we have virtually done transactions across all of the countries in the region, including one in Myanmar, interestingly, with Mayor Brown acting as the legal advisors to lenders. Just a bit of a background about myself. I joined DBS in December 2010 once the project finance team was formed. It was formed in April 2010. I was the first external hire into the team. Over the years, we have grown from about 4. We are now about 20 odd people. Most of us based in Singapore. We have people in Australia, Korea, and China supporting the business.
Great, thanks, Subhash. That's helpful. Okay, let's maybe kick off looking at the current state of play in Asia. So battery storage, it's been widely described as the final piece of the renewables jigsaw, so to speak. And it's obviously garnering a lot of global attention now with the major shift to renewables, especially post-COVID. And that's obviously a shift you and I are seeing in Asia as well, Subhash. So Asia obviously covers a very large and diverse region, however. So with that in mind, could you maybe comment on what you see as the current place of Asia on the progression curve in terms of the rollout of battery storage?
Yeah, I think in Asia, it's in early stages. I presume, okay, maybe let me just pull it back. I think battery storage systems are relatively new, right? So as technology progresses, early on, it was more battery usage for consumer goods. Now going into utility scale, people are realizing what is a potential which can be used, how it can be used in terms of the overall energy balancing, right? In Asia, it's in early stages. Where we see action is obviously the developed markets, and it's no surprise, Australia, China, you're seeing that in Singapore also slowly starting off. I think this is where I think the early stage battery projects will come in. We've actually done a transaction in Australia earlier this year with a long-term contract with one of the gentailers. And that shows that battery solutions on a standalone are starting to find application. I think where we see this going is in terms of the current capital cost, the battery solutions are still expensive, which is why I mentioned developed markets first. We have seen other markets slowly picking up. We did an advisory in Indonesia where we worked with a sponsor on their bid for Project Indonesia, which is an interesting one as a combination of battery plus solar. And that was meant to look at replacing the peaking power. So from a cost and economics perspective, it works. It's slowly coming up in other parts. So India had this recent round-the-clock tenders, which is a mix of battery, solar, and wind. EMA is talking, EMA as in EMA in Singapore is talking about import of 24/7 power into Singapore on a renewable basis, which means you need batteries. So definitely a push in terms of batteries for the future.
Yeah. So I think that's what you would expect, wouldn't it, in Asia? That's what we saw in renewables, just countries moving at relatively different speeds with the more developed, so to speak, jurisdictions and more progressed economies rolling it out faster. So, okay, that's great. So early stage, but maybe just looking at the extent now of the opportunity, Sebastian, and to hear your thoughts on that. So notwithstanding that the region, or parts of the region at least, are at a relatively early stage, I think I was reading that by 2023, the Asia Pacific region is going to overtake North America as the world's largest market for utility scale energy storage. And that seems to me pretty soon. I mean, what do you personally see as the extent of the opportunity, and are there specific countries in Asia and Southeast Asia perhaps that you would sort of single out as particularly suitable or ripe for a battery storage solution?
I mean, if you look at Asia as a whole, on average, most of the developing markets are talking about 25% of their energy from renewable by 2025. And this is from a range of 5% to 10% in various markets going up to 25. If you look at Australia, there one classic example is of South Australia, which is actually ahead of the curve in terms of renewable. And one could clearly see that with the renewable percentage or mix in the grid going to about 25-35%, you end up having the issues of intermittency and the need for grid to be stabilized. Now, there are different ways you can do it. One is obviously the transmission capacity being increased. The other one would be to look at pumped hydro type of facilities, which is quite geography dependent, whether you have the ability to do that. And then the obvious choice is storage solution like battery. So if I put where the targets of the countries in the region vis-a-vis what can be done for the storage solution or the managing the intermittency in the short term, I would say battery prospects are very good, right? So you look at Vietnam, we hear about curtailment, especially with the rapid rollout in a couple of provinces. While transmission grid stabilization takes 2-3 years, battery is probably a quicker fix. And that is where how is the cost borne by the system will make a difference in how quickly it rolls out, right? If the cost of battery systems drop similar to what has happened on the solar, as an example, solar dropped from somewhere around 5 million per megawatt in early 2010-11 to around, I think it's about 500,000 per megawatt. So it's almost like a 90% drop. So if battery solutions drop in a similar manner, then I think you would see this applied across the entire region in a very rapid manner. The one interesting space in Asia where it can find an immediate application would be some of the island nations or island countries. So let's say Philippines, multiple islands, Indonesia, multiple islands. So in some of these islands, you are using diesel as the power source. Battery and renewable is probably a neat fix to the power requirements, and it will actually be as competitive as probably even more competitive than diesel at this stage.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with all of that. And I think maybe just for some of the listeners in parts of the world less familiar with the sector in Asia, just on Vietnam. So obviously, Vietnam rolled out a feed-in tariff a number of years ago. And what we saw was just a real explosion of interest in that, didn't we? And I think the initial target of the government was somewhere around 850 megawatts, and they ended up with 8.9 gigawatts of renewable capacity, which was just kind of unbelievable at the time. And great news for renewables, but where they've ended up, haven't they, is almost like a victim of their own success, in a sense that now the grid is struggling to cope, as you said, with all the issues that come with renewables, and probably therefore placing it in a prime position to take advantage of storage. Other than, because what's the alternative? It's really to upgrade the grid, isn't it? And maybe just to layer over that again for people less familiar with the region, is it worth mentioning that in Asia and Southeast Asia in particular, there's not the same inter-grid connection across the region. Did you want to comment on that at all, just on Vietnam, Subhash, anymore?
That's an interesting point. I've been in some of these ASEAN meetings before. There is talk about having grid connectivity across the countries. And if you have that, that'll actually help ease some of the intermittency issues. At the moment, it's very restricted and on a bilateral basis. Traditionally, you've had Laos connected to Thailand, again, on the back of the hydro facilities there. You have Laos connected into Vietnam, and there is a little bit of connectivity. When I say little bit, it's because the capacity is quite low between Malaysia and Indonesia and Kalimantan Island, right?
Yeah.
And there is an interconnector between Singapore and Malaysia, but all of them are very small capacities, and there are quite a bit of limitations in terms of regulations as well. So I think getting there from point of view of regulations, which is going to take time, and that is where I think the batteries probably step up faster than that.
I agree. I mean, as you say, we've been looking and talking about greater grid interconnection across the region for many years now, haven't we? And I think the risk is always that if you wait for that to happen as any kind of real solution to increase penetration of renewables, we could be waiting a long time. But I think that probably brings us on to the next sort of topic I wanted to discuss was with battery storage. Then we've got countries which are clearly ripe for the solution, a sort of perfect storm almost of circumstances which could be alleviated by storage solutions. But I think then the question becomes how quickly do we think this could be rolled out, and therefore what are the challenges or the principal challenges that you're seeing at the moment to battery storage becoming a sort of quickly implemented solution versus grid upgrades, etc.?
I think one of the key ones is technology. There's rapid advancement in the battery technology, but what I understand talking to some of the technical experts as well, and also based on our own recent deal experience, is that for a battery to be used as a short-term charging, discharging is easier than having a battery charge and then discharge over a longer period of, let's say, 4 hours, right? So the timing of how you use it makes a big difference in terms of the capital cost and how the battery solution is designed. What is also important for batteries is how do you manage, especially in the utility scale, large capacity, how do you manage the issue of heating? So the heating up of batteries, which can lead to fires. So I think you probably read about the case of neon batteries in Australia. When they were doing commissioning, there was a fire outbreak. and hence
Good, yeah.
it's critical to ensure, especially when you're looking at large units, how do you ventilate it? How do you make sure you get over the heating issues and potential fire?
Yeah.
So that's a
Yeah.
critical consideration from a design perspective. And then the other key issue from a technology will be what are the warranties and long-term support, right? Because
Yeah.
it is of recent, I think battery technology is recent, whether when you apply it for contracts which are 20, 25 years, how it behaves, I think that's tied back to what kind of warranties the
Yeah.
manufacturers can give, right? So I think technology is a big point, and that drives your tenor, whether you can do 10, 15, 20. The other
And
point, as I
degradation as well, Sebastian. That's another point I've read about, the sort of degradation risk.
yeah,
Is that something
true.
people are still trying to get their head around, as you say, in terms of tenors as well, and modelling that degradation against potentially longer term tenors of PF?
Yeah, correct. Actually, it's a very good point. As you charge and discharge, depending on the number of cycles, your capacity also comes down. So when you're contracting with parties saying, I'm going to give you 100 megawatt hour, 4-hour discharge, how do you ensure that the 100 megawatt hours can be kept up? Or how do you say what megawatt hours will it go down to in 15 years' time? Right. So degradation is an issue. I think people have managed that in solar deals so far. I think solar panels also have the similar one. Again, solar, by the time it went into long-term contracts, there was a little bit of slightly longer track record than what batteries have at this time.
Yeah. Okay. No,
So
that's really interesting.
So one of the big challenges effectively is the technology aspects. The second challenge is around the price point, and the price point will depend on, as I mentioned, what is the design for, and how long can the warranties and all go, because longer the period to amortize the capital costs, the tariff which is required will be lower, right? So at what price point you bring in, and that is where my earlier suggestion that maybe this is something which can be used at the outset as replacing the peaking plants, and then slowly goes back into the base load. The third aspect would be the regulatory support, right? So what are the governments doing in terms of, can there be a battery solution standalone? Does it have to be let's say a solar plus?
I mean, just maybe from this legal side, commenting on that for a moment. I agree. I mean, I think what we are seeing, which is good news, is increased political will across the region to adopt storage as a solution. But I do think regulations haven't caught up yet. So, I mean, some countries I think we are seeing begin to include storage into their power plans. Others are not yet. And the regulatory and policy side, I think, just hasn't caught up. So, I mean, examples of that would be permitting. Tax is always a big one. These are tricky points in any jurisdiction anyway, but they then need to be tailored towards batteries. And I think that the danger is, I just think you can't shoehorn storage or battery storage into policy frameworks and grid codes that are essentially tailored towards very centralized models of thermal generation, right? So, I think there's probably work to do in that. And what we would hope, at least, is that we see a kind of similar trajectory to what we saw with renewables. You have with speed bumps along the way, of course, but you have a period of governments essentially educating themselves off the back of lobbying from industry, and bringing in the external advisors needed to then draft the relevant regulations. But I think it's difficult with batteries, isn't it? Because as we've touched upon, there are different services that batteries can provide. You've got frequency modulation, etc. You've got capacity, and quite which way that will go, or whether you're going to need to stack the revenues as we've seen in other countries. These are all kind of open questions for Asia, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I mean, I think there have been some throwaway comments in the region, people saying, oh, the temporary grid issues, why don't you put a battery? But it's not as simple as that, because obviously to put up a battery solution for it, you need to be assured of the future revenue. And that's where things like, in addition to your basic storage, can you get other services and fees in terms of frequency modulation and so on. So it'll be interesting to see how the business models evolve.
Yeah, I mean, could we maybe just touch on that for a second, just given the sort of finance side from your perspective, Subhash, and how suitable you think or how much you'll see project finance in this area? I mean, do you think that's going to happen, or do you think that it's still open to question, given perhaps the scale of standalone battery projects and the debt amounts that will be required versus bigger projects? Or good to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, we have to see how the models evolve. But if I look at putting on a project finance hat, a model which will work and is quite similar to what we did in the deal earlier this year is the availability concept. So you're providing the battery solution in terms of availability, megawatt hours for the next X number of years. And for that, the retailer or it could even be a government provides a fixed fee, and then they will utilize it within the technical parameters in terms of managing the peak and the trough, right? You charge a battery when the price is the lowest and use that to bring the peak down, so you get a fairly well-balanced tariff across the day as well. So that's probably that model, I think, definitely can be banked. The issue then would be in terms of warranties, the technical backing which comes along with the module supply. Right? There could be variations to this model, which includes your upside in terms of other ancillary services. But I think if it's something which is merchant, it's from a financing as a PF will be quite risky. The equity perspective, there could be big upsides in the near term because as the renewables are rolled out, you could see major differences between the peak and the low price during the day. But the risk you run is as people put on storage solutions, including pumped hydro, grid, and batteries, that difference comes down and your business model may not be economic anymore. So it'll be an interesting one to see how this evolves.
And maybe that's a good point just to sort of begin to wrap up on. I mean, it's always difficult to make bold predictions, but even just in terms of timing, I mean, where do you think, or what are your sort of predictions over the next few years as to how soon we'll actually see batteries coming into some of these challenging jurisdictions to really solve the issue? And I guess the second part to that question, kind of an obvious one in the current climate, but do you think some of these very bullish predictions on timing have been pushed back now given COVID?
Yeah. So maybe in terms of markets, my own view is Australia will be the place where these will be first rolled out from an Asia perspective. We already have done one, and there's almost talks about 2 gigawatt hours type of battery solutions in Australia. So we would see Australia as the one where we, in the next 3 years, significant capacity to come on stream. And Australia is interesting because it's coming out as a single storage solution by itself. I would say the next country where we would see it coming, next two countries where we would see it coming as a combination of supply or generation plus storage, I think would be India and Vietnam, right?
Right.
Vietnam, because there are the curtailment issues. Potentially, I think you could see it as a wind plus battery, and there you are charging the battery using your own source, so you can sign a PPA, which is a blended price. So
Yeah.
I think blended price model will probably roll out faster in the emerging markets. So I would put India, Vietnam, and Indonesia in that order in terms of battery deals
Right.
coming in. Singapore will probably switch to importing power, which is why I didn't mention that as a market, because Singapore is majority gas-fired, and they will be looking at importing power, which means that on the back of those import of power by Singapore, you could see specific projects, and Singapore is talking about potentially up to 2 gigawatts of imports. I think these are probably
Right.
the 3 or 4 pockets of opportunities I see in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
COVID, yes, COVID will be an impact. I am hoping. I think we probably, I said the same thing last year. Things will open up in six
Yeah.
months. This time,
Well,
I
I
think
think
it's
we're
probably a
closer
bit
now than we
more
were.
optimistic. Yeah, it's a bit more optimistic because of the vaccination, and I think hopefully by early next year, people will start traveling around within Southeast Asia, because I think
Yeah.
that uh, opening up will be a critical one in terms of how
Hmm.
quickly projects start rolling out.
Yeah, and maybe just last question, Subhash, just on Singapore you mentioned there, and I'm hopeful maybe even Singapore can kind of perform almost a kind of incubator project for some of the ideas for the region. I think it tends to be very good at that. DBS, Singapore Development, big Singapore bank. What's just to finish, where do you see DBS's role in the coming years on this playing out? I know you've been involved in a few projects.
Yeah, I think from DBS perspective, we are focused on advising and leading the transactions with our clients. And that is where we have seen, as I briefly mentioned, we did advisory for a solar plus battery in Indonesia. We advised a client on the round-the-clock tender in India. And
Right.
what we see as our unique proposition is the ability to come out with solutions because of our understanding of the region. Right? So we are present in many countries in the region. Our risk appetite is Asian risk appetite. So we are able to offer value-added services on top of simple loans, and that is where we will continue to focus. Singapore also acts as a hub for the region from a financing, and that also is helpful for us. When a sponsor approaches us, we can easily put together the ecosystem in terms of the financing. With the likes of us as a financial advisor, plus you have the technical, legal, most of the legal practices like yours are all based in Singapore from a project finance perspective, and that is a big plus from a sponsor.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, that seems like a good point to wrap up on, Sebastian. Thanks again for joining us. And hopefully you and I will see each other on a storage deal soon in the region. That would be fantastic. Okay, great.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks everybody for listening. Yeah, thanks, Sebastian. Bye. Okay, finish.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That was great. That was that was a good 25 minutes, actually.
Yeah, we can probably cut a little bit, I think. It became quite natural. I think it's probably better this way rather than it's slightly more easier talking. So I think you may have to, the first question I started responding, you can probably cut an initial part of it because there's a little bit of a repeat.
But after that, don't worry. Yeah, well, we'll have a look at it, and I think I'm not sure when they're actually going to put it out. So we can have a look at it, and then you and I can have some input on it, obviously, before it actually goes out. But overall, I thought that was very good. So no, I really appreciate it, Sebastian. Thanks for taking the time out to do it.
No worries.
Yeah.
My
So
only
I'm flying to the UK tonight.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
2 weeks or what?
No, just 1 week. So my daughter's still on school break for 1 more week. And my wife subscribes to all these COVID updates. So as soon as they announced, I think it was on Tuesday night, they announced that children under 12 could go on the VTL flights. She just booked us to the UK. It was one of these spur of the moment decisions that I think we both woke up the next morning and thought, "Oh my God, what have we done?" So we're frantically. Yeah, no, it'll be good. I mean, it's you were frantically packing, and we board the flight at sort of 1 a.m. tonight, and we've got all the testing sorted out. UK, it's pouring with rain, and it's. But
it doesn't matter. It'll be fun.
Right? It'll be fun, and it's autumn, and so first trip out of the country in nearly 2 years.
Yeah. No, excellent. Have a excellent break. I'm sure you will enjoy just being out, meeting with people. I think that will make a big difference.
Yeah, going to reunite with family and hopefully not catch COVID.
So I did that, right? I went alone to India just to meet my parents because it was more than 2.5 years.
Yeah.
I spent 2 weeks there. Of course, those 2 weeks, because of what is happening in India, I didn't even step out of the house because the last thing I wanted to do was catch it myself and then give it to the others. And back to 2 weeks of quarantine. But I think it'll be good if I'm hoping things will start opening up sooner.
Yeah, I mean, you feel there's kind of some momentum now, right? I mean, it's and I know we've been saying all along it's just a matter of time, but I think now there's a bit of a wave. So I hope that, very soon we start opening up regionally. I saw this morning actually there's a headline saying New South Wales and Australia is now scrapping quarantine, and if you're vaccinated, you can fly into New South Wales, I think.
So New South Wales, Sydney had almost a 4-month of lockdown.
Yeah, I know.
And they opened up on Monday this last week, and apparently people were waiting to go to parks at midnight because they said from Monday. So there was apparently 12 midnight queue to get into parks and getting into pubs. So the queues out.
They had an absolute shocking lockdown, didn't they? They've been under lockdown for a long time. The poor, I mean, it's a shame.
Yeah. But, so they apparently parties till about 4 or 5 in the morning.
It's like the end of a war, isn't it? Almost. It's people just flood the streets in happiness. Anyway, hopefully you'll get back and see your family again soon, Sebastian.
Hopefully. Yesterday, my daughter and I went for this show at Marina Bay Sands. There's this French show, Lake Clicquot or something. It's a acrobat show. So we went.
Cirque du Soleil, is that?
No, Cirque du Soleil, but this one is slightly different. They had a different name, but similar wine.
Right.
And there were almost like, I would say about 80 to 100 people, 80 people there.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And a live performance. So I think, towards the end, the lead person in that group gave a very sentimental speech about how she's very happy to be back in front of everyone performing after 18 months.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I think for performers, it's been difficult. That's what they thrive on, right? The live audience. Oh, that's nice. That's great.
That is a nice one. Okay, all right.
Brilliant.
Have a fantastic.
Thanks, Sebastian. Have a good week. A good weekend, and catch up soon. I will be in touch on this.
So okay. Thanks.
Okay. Bye. Cheers. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.